I'd like to now move on to welcome Martin Stevens, who is our next presenter. And Martin is going to talk in a little more detail about the Wessex Academic Health Sciences Network, or AHSN for short, and the work it's doing with local industry and with hospitals like ourselves and indeed academia. Martin's just recently taken up the post as Chief Executive, and he'll no doubt tell you a bit more about that. But he is a pharmacist by profession, and he held the role of Chief Pharmacist here and in a number of other trusts around the country. In addition to that, he's worked both at the Department of Health as National Clinical Director for Hospital Pharmacy, and he's written various papers and edited Hospital Pharmacy magazines. So, Martin, we look forward to what you have to say to us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. Great to be part of a day. One of our important partners, University Hospital Southampton. We're a partnership organisation. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. But yes, I've worked down at Southampton and nationally as a pharmacist, and then taken on a few other roles as well. A couple of years ago, well, 18 months ago now, I got involved in the setup of the Academic Health Science Network for Wessex. And then last October, I was appointed as the Chief Exec. I just want to talk a little bit about why we're here and how this fits in. And part of our raison d'etre is to make some of the stories that Mike and Fiona have been talking about a success, and a success across Wessex, really. So we're very much an organisation that looks to make the organisations that are our members successful in what they're trying to do, as well as reaching out to industry. I think it was about my second week as being acting managing director for the AHSN back in October 2012, I popped along to a really good little company, an SME, the other side of Portsmouth, and I met with the whole team there and the chief exec. And one of the questions I asked was, what's it like as an SME to do business with the NHS? I had a very polite and good answer with lots of examples given, but in essence they could have said, well, it's pretty rubbish really. And we talked about bidding processes that didn't work well, that changed, the rules changed halfway through, etc., etc. And so I made a promise on that day that, as far as I was concerned, the AHSN would look to try and make a difference in Wessex and the other AHSNs across the country, so that businesses could more easily do business with the NHS. Now, there are fantastic examples I've known throughout my career of innovation being grabbed, developed and put in place, but there are also, I know, lots of times when things don't go as smoothly as they should. So that's what we're about, really. Excuse the complexity of this diagram. People will know that poverty brings with it ill health. There are some issues around lots of wealth as well that can cause ill health, but in general, those that, certainly in the UK, that are better off tend to have better health outcomes. So it's known there's a link between wealth and health in that sense. But where Academic Health Science Networks come out of was a document called Innovation, Health and Wealth, which was launched back in the end of 2011. I think there was a Prime Minister's speech. It falls slightly within the whole life sciences strategy of government, but it was a specific document which pointed out the important link between innovation and better health and boosting the economy within the UK. It set out the idea or the knowledge that big systems, health systems, and in particular the NHS, is slow at grabbing innovation and getting into place and deriving the benefits thereof. And it made the point that if we are to really face the financial challenge that healthcare has throughout the Western world, but talking about the UK, that £30 billion gap between the demand for health and our ability to fund that within the NHS, if we're going to meet that challenge, then we really need to take innovation very seriously. We need to be grabbing innovation and making change happen so that we can effectively get more for less, if you like. I guess we're talking about whole systems. Mike's alluded to some of the issues around individual organisations struggling to get innovation in and the sort of cost change there. But if we look at the system as a whole, People might be familiar with QIP, Quality, Innovation, Productivity Prevention, launched under the last administration of the Labour government, but carried on by the current coalition government, really which set out that if we're going to close that gap between demand and resources available, then we do need to make sure we drive up quality. Because getting things right first time, avoiding readmissions, getting primary care better so that, I don't know, asthma is treated better, inhalers are used better, so you have fewer admissions to hospital. If you get the quality up, then the costs actually come down. And innovation, whether that be in device or pathway or application or use of technology, is a key part within that, as well as prevention. And when innovation is used in that particular document, it's meaning not just discovery and invention, but it's talking, yes, discovery and invention, but also then development, adoption and spread, and then making sustainable the way we do things, a new way we do things. And that, if we do that, if we take that seriously as an NHS, then that's good for health, but it's also good for wealth, because if companies, SMEs, pharma, larger companies, if they're able to sell to the NHS, it does make it easier to sell to the world. So if we have a company just up the road that has got a great product, and one hospital in Wessex is using it, but nobody else is, that then is, the patients are missing out on benefits, but also potentially jobs and exports are being lost. So innovation, health and wealth, we're setting out the case for addressing that. And part of the answer set out in that document would be that academic health science networks would be created. So that was the conception. And then we moved on through 2013 into delivery. There are 15 contracted now, signed off, accredited academic health science networks across the country. We're the purple bit at the bottom. So South Wiltshire, Dorset, Hampshire, Isle of Wight, and links to the Channel Islands as well, which I know we want to develop. And then you can see the other ones. Some of you perhaps are based in some of those other areas. And as a network of networks, we are working together so that it makes it easier if ideas are adopted in one part of the country, they can be more easily spread. Academic health science networks, as I've mentioned, are partnership organisations, commissioners, so the clinical commissioning groups, providers, so the foundation trusts and non-foundation trusts, and the universities. So there's about 27 organisations across Wessex that form part of that. And University Hospital Southampton and Southampton University are two of those, and Solent University, which was mentioned, is another, but the other organisations too. There is a crowded landscape. The NHS has massively changed, and those of you outside it must think, oh, how do we deal with the NHS? I think we're committed very much in Wessex to work together. So whether that be the Clinical Research Network, which is just reshaped across Wessex, whether that is the Commissioning Support Unit, Health Education Wessex, which has a responsibility for education and development of staff, or the Strategic Clinical Networks, part of the local area team structure of NHS England, a whole string of, and I could have just used the acronyms there, which would baffle us all. We're determined actually to work in partnership together, not to compete, not to duplicate, but to work together so that in Wessex we can make a coherent system that drives up health and health outcomes and makes helps on delivering an improved economy. So each of those 15 AHSNs have slightly different programs, slightly different approaches perhaps, but we have a common license. 4 areas of our license. The first one is around addressing local health needs, looking to make change by reducing variation across the patch. So, if there's a good system for diabetes in Portsmouth, let's get that spread across the rest of the patch. If the way that we run our rheumatology clinics in Southampton, some of the ways we use the medicines particularly is good, well, then we can use that as a model to spread across Wessex, but also across the rest of the country. So we've picked a number of areas to focus on: nutrition, reducing misuse of alcohol, dementia, which clearly is a national challenge. We've put down long-term conditions. We've started with respiratory. Medicines optimization is a cross-cutting theme, and then digital health as a cross-cutting theme. So the second area is to speed up adoption of innovation, getting research into practice, looking for better outcomes and better patient experience. Now, that applies, so I mentioned some of our specialised areas, so that applies to those. So in respiratory, if there's a new device that helps or a new app that helps you know your number with alcohol, which there is, and so I know I've pledged to make sure I know my number for alcohol, we can encourage the spread of that across Wessex. But also there's specific work around NICE technology appraisals, so very heavily focused on medicines, those of course, but making sure that we grab the benefits for our patients by making sure that we implement and spread the use of NICE approved technologies. Also the National High Impact Innovation, which is mentioned in Innovation, Health and Wealth, that's some specific interventions or groups of interventions which are encouraged as evidence-based and the right thing to do and deliver better outcomes at lower cost. Again, we're looking to support that. We also want to be backing not necessarily things that have been nationally declared as high impact innovations, but we see as important innovations for local use. We haven't, it is early days for us yet, we haven't fully worked up our system of how we decide which of those we pick and spread, but that's something we're working on at the moment. And we certainly are open for business around that, and I know Bronwyn is in the audience and Kevin are talking to a number of probably you and others around how we do that well. The next one is building that culture of partnership and collaboration. I've mentioned the slightly crowded landscape with organisations, but our determination to work in partnership and link up properly. I suppose within section C is our commitment to supporting research. So the Clinical Research Network for Wessex clearly has that as their prime goal. We support that. I sit on their overarching board, and we have a representation on our board. And we're committed to help support both taxpayer-funded research, but also clinical trials. And we want to make sure that Wessex is an attractive place, which it is already, for clinical trials to be undertaken. You'll hear more about that today. And that isn't just this organisation, but all other organisations, including primary care across Wessex. It's got some great demographics to be an attractive place to work, and some of our information systems are also supportive of that. And as Fiona said, actually, patients in clinical trials do have great outcomes, and so it's something that patients have a right to expect to have offered to them. And then the last one is that creating wealth, so co-developing, testing, early adoption and spread. So that's very much, I guess, the focus of today. And we've got a number of things which we're working on that front. We've supported the Small Business Research Initiative. We've had a clinician who we've supported and freed up to be able to lead on the COPD work, which Wessex AHSN jointly with Kent, Surrey and Sussex AHSN has led. And it may be that there'll be sort of smaller versions of that we would like to test and use as an AHSN. But again, that's slightly work in progress. We're also working very closely with Swindon and Wiltshire Local Enterprise Partnership to look to see how we can help with business management and consultancies to support to develop an excellent life sciences cluster around this part of the world. So that's how we were conceived, as it were. That's a little bit of how we've been born and what we're looking to do in the future. Just a couple of quotes. What is the future? I think it is important that we listen to, I don't agree with Henry Ford on a number of issues, but not particularly on that. It is important that we listen to what frontline teams want, what their problems are that they need to face, maybe ideas of making change happen that would, an innovation could help with. And we've been doing that. We've been talking to folks across the patch, and we've got a number, how many ideas, Bronwyn? We've got 150 potential innovations that could come into being. Our next stage now is to start linking those to companies and other companies to try and actually see which can be turned into products or apps or systems or pathways or whatever things which can actually make a difference for patients. And so it is right to be listening to people, but there is some truth in that, isn't there? Unless you've got that creative idea of something totally different and new, you wouldn't have cars, you'd have just faster horses. Maybe that would be a good thing, I'm not sure. But there is also that thinking totally, I'm trying to avoid using any jargon here, trying to think totally different about the way you solve problems. I think we need to be open to that and look at just novel, transformatory changes, not just sort of step-by-step changes. And it is hard to make predictions, especially about the future. We're conscious that the NHS, quite rightly, has political accountability and structures change from time to time. But I think, as I've said at the start, really, and from the conversation I had with SME chief exec previously, the Academic Health Science Network, with its partners, and it would be nothing without its partners, is absolutely determined to make Wessex a place where business can do business, where we do grab innovation, and that means, as we do that, it improves health outcomes, and also it's good for UK PLC and good for business. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Cheers.